Obviously, I want to start off by talking about The Mandalorian and season three. So with, big franchises like Star Wars and Marvel and stuff like that, I find it so interesting because sometimes the people working on the projects are given as little information as the fans. It's all very like shrouded in secrecy, need to know
Yes.
basis. So I was wondering kind of what creative freedoms that affords you as an actress, and also what are some of the drawbacks to that?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, it's changed along the way. Season one, I truly knew so little about
Yeah.
about what I was involved with, which in some ways was great. Because this character is unlike any other that I've ever played because she is normally I like to know as much as possible about a character's history and, a lot of very personal details about them. But I feel like the armorer exists in service of Din Djarin and in service to the Mandalorian people. I wouldn't necessarily have said that about her being in service to Din Djarin at the beginning of the show. I don't think I realized that at the beginning, but definitely in service to the Mandalorian people. And she is somebody who I've always sort of recognized that she is this archetypal figure, and she is it's helped me to think about her sort of what she represents symbolically along the way. And so the first season, I did think a lot about that. And I talked with John and Dave a lot about sort of images for her and their inspiration for her in terms of they were referencing a lot of what George Lucas had drawn inspiration from with Kurosawa films,
Yeah.
and really encouraged me to look at, samurai warriors, and I got a lot out of just that simplicity, economy of movement, and that gracefulness and dignity. And so then it was, I mean, watching that first season was such a trip because I knew so little about the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And then when I came back for the Book of Boba Fett, and then one of the drawbacks I will say is one never really knows when one has job security, because I didn't know if my character would ever come back. I knew I was alive
Yeah.
because John had said that he'd originally written that the end of that scene, the fight with the stormtroopers, he had written that she died at the end of that fight, that she was sacrificing herself. And then he had changed his mind. And I said, well, thank you for that, because I'm
Yeah.
glad a
Yeah.
possibility that she could return. But I didn't know. And then I wasn't in season two, and no one told me why or, whether I would come back.
Yeah.
And then they called me up for the Book of Boba Fett, and I was very excited about that. But I got that script, and I saw that I was revealing all of this information, and I asked if I could please talk to them so that I could get very clear about
Sure.
what was new information and what the fans already knew. And it was at that point that they said they were laying a lot of groundwork for season three. And they did tell me a lot more information than I sort of expected them to, because of the plans that they had for this season.
Sure.
But there was still so much that, that I think it's sort of a combination of John and Dave are wonderful, in that they do put some very specific details into place because they want to take care of the story. But then there's also things that they want to leave open, because they know that it's not vital for the story at that point.
Yeah.
And it leaves open more possibilities for their writing down the road. They're really smart that way.
Like leaving teasers almost like so people have something to look forward to, where you can go back and be like, oh, I remember that from season one, episode one, whatever it is.
So you kind of just have to make friends with the fact that you're not going to be allowed to know everything because of the secrecy of it. And it does, I won't lie, like, it gets in the way sometimes, all the NDAs and all that, because there are times when you, as an actor, are only given your scenes and not very far ahead of time. And so you have to prepare, like, at the last minute, And it would be really great to have some more lead time. You know, you could do
Yeah.
your job a lot better.
Yeah.
Or it would really help to have a whole script to see how your scene fits into the arc of the story.
Mm.
Um, because we're not just doing our scenes in isolation. You know, even if your character is not in other scenes in an episode, there's an arc to the episode, and you can get clues about how your character works in a scene based on how that scene fits into the arc. And so it is sort of a bummer that way, but you kind of just have to trust that you have the information that you need and that it's all going to
Yeah.
work out.
I mean, that all makes sense. I feel like with any job, you would want some leeway and mental preparation.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that kind of leads into my next question, where you've talked in the past about how with other characters you've portrayed, whether on screen or on the stage, you kind of have this backstory in their head, whereas with the armorer, it's kind of always changing, and you tap into different backstories at different moments whenever it serves whatever moment you're in. So can you talk to me maybe a little bit about what backstories you drafted for her in your head, or?
Well, I would say that that's changed the most in terms of what I think my relationship is to Din Djarin.
Mm.
Um, I wasn't sure, and I'm still not entirely sure necessarily how long they've known each other. Um, when I first met him in season 1, I didn't know if he was somebody that I knew from the past or if I just knew of him,
Mm.
if I felt uh I have definitely, just for my own sake, I have sort of come up with different foundlings that I think I might have helped along the way,
Mm.
and come up with more specific stories for that. Because I do, she talks about the foundlings a lot, and I think that she must have had um, more personal relationships with some of them along the way. I
Mm.
do think that Din Djarin is unique in terms of sort of really taking a specific interest in guiding one in this singular way, the way that she has with him. Um, I think that they have a special relationship that way.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's just been there's different things, as I always do with the character. There's different things in my own life that I've drawn from, and
Mm.
um, but yeah, she's taken me for a ride.
Yeah, which is always good. I'm sure it's fun to be taken for a ride and not know
Oh
where
yes.
you're going. Yeah. And obviously there's the armor, there's the helmet, all of that. So, as an actress, what has that taught you about like what you lean into when you don't have the ability to express or communicate on your face? And have you used that in other roles since? And have you leaned into different things that you haven't for other roles with that?
I love wearing the helmet, and I hate wearing the helmet.
Yes.
Um, it is it's such a wonderful challenge. And overall, it has taught me just to not work so hard, which is sort of like my
Mm.
one of the lessons of life for me. And I don't mean like don't work so hard in the like just be lazy way, but like don't try so hard for the sake of like, you know, efforting so much.
Yeah.
Um, because one thing that doesn't work when you're wearing a helmet, especially when you're on camera. Now, I've done mask work on stage,
Mm.
and the difference is that when you're on stage, the audience can see your entire body the whole time.
Mhm.
And so it's not as hyper focused on tiny little movements. But when you're on camera, it's so focused on just your face, where your face would be, that
Yeah.
every little movement of your head is sort of magnified. And so it can be very distracting if you're moving at the wrong time. It's sort of like a friend of mine who's a magician was sort of, and a wonderful magician. He was sort of comparing being a magician to acting, and how if
Mm.
you're a magician, if you have you're always trying to get the audience to look where you want them to look so that they don't see what you're doing to hide the trick.
Mm.
And if you have the wrong movement at the wrong time, it's going to give it away. In the same way as an actor, if you have extraneous movement at the wrong time, the audience is not going to believe your character.
Mm.
And with the masks, with the helmets, any extra movement is very distracting, and you don't believe the character. I don't, you don't believe the armor, I think, if she's moving too much.
Yeah.
And so I've really had to trust a lot of economy of movement and simplicity. And when I'm most worried about, but what if they don't know what I'm thinking? What if they don't know what I'm feeling? I have to actually do less.
Yeah.
And that is such a gift to me, because I don't think I naturally trust things like that. And I'm
Sure.
somebody who, any of my friends will tell you that I am not somebody who sits still much. I'm constantly moving. I'm constantly going. I'm constantly wanting to do more.
Yeah.
And so she's taught me a lot that way. And it's really a wonderful gift.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes really uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
always good. And I love the helmet that way. And it's also uncomfortable that way. I also love it because normally when I go to set, I have to sit in hair and makeup for about 2 hours.
Mm.
It's getting there very, very early.
Yeah.
On days when, for instance, Katie, who plays Bo-Katan, we're both called.
Mm.
And it's a day when she's not wearing her helmet. She'll have to get there at 4 a.m. I don't have to get there till like 6 a.m. because
That's the best.
it takes me 10 minutes to put
Yeah.
on all my stuff and get to set.
Right.
It's fabulous.
Which it must be how men feel all the time, which would be
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So lucky. Well, and that's interesting that you mentioned, like, I've never heard it being compared to a magician, but if you think about it that way, of course they're trying to, use their body as a way to kind of engage with the audience and make you look where you wouldn't look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's all both things are storytelling. A magician is trying to tell you a story.
Yeah.
And they're trying to tell you, they want you to follow the story they're trying to tell. But if they like fidget the wrong way, if they move the wrong way at the wrong time, then you're going to follow the story that they're trying to hide.
Yes.
And
And you're like, I know what you're about. Yeah.
yeah, it's the same
Yeah.
way with acting too. If you, everyone has different tics and stuff, or like stuff that like movements that come out of anxiety, and those are the things that make us go, I don't quite buy you as that character. I don't. And so then the story's not being told.
Sure. And then kind of along those lines, because you mentioned, you have a stage background. I've read you've done a lot of Shakespeare, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, like, how that, what lessons you kind of took away from doing a lot, particularly Shakespeare, but also any play on the stage, and how did you translate that onto the screen? And do you feel like it was a good foundation to have for not just this role, but for any role that you take on?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I always learn the most when I'm doing theater. I think partly because it's just, there's the repetition of it. You get to spend so much more time with a group of actors on a particular text, and so you get so much deeper into it. And you just, you're moving so much more quickly when you're doing television and doing film. Right. So there's just not usually as much of a chance to go in depth. But also the immediacy of being there in front of the audience. You get to make discoveries, and you're getting feedback immediately. And so you're finding out whether or not things work. Whereas when you're doing it on camera, the audience that's around you is not allowed to respond, because everybody has to be very quiet and very contained. And you as the actor are sort of trying to block out everyone that's around you. You can't take them in, really. You can't respond to them because your audience is the camera.
Yeah.
And Shakespeare, I think, is a wonderful foundation for anything, because the language is so complex, and there's so many ideas that build on each other, and there's so many long thoughts that you have to make the energy of the thought carry through all the way to the end, or else it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And that is surprisingly helpful, I have found, even for when I'm auditioning for something, or when I'm on a show that has like a lot of legal jargon or a lot of medical jargon, because those can be very long thoughts. I actually have a group that started during the pandemic that was well, it's still on Zoom, but a director that I worked with named Ron Daniel started this Shakespeare salon where we would get together and we would read through different plays and scenes and sonnets, and we're still doing it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
with
love that.
and everyone talks about how useful it's been for various things that we work on, because all of us are, you know, off shooting TV shows and doing movies and doing all sorts of stuff that's not Shakespeare, but the ideas that we use in that group to work with the text are so applicable to um any sort of acting, because you're you know you're trying to present your ideas in a way that draws the audience in, that carries the thought through, that carries the energy through, that is honest. And we've all seen Shakespeare that is very like speechified, and you're
Yes.
like, oh, that person sounds so pretty the way they're saying that, but you don't buy that they're a living, breathing human being. And
Yeah.
that's vital.
Yeah, for sure. And I see we're running out of time. I have two more quick questions if you have the
Yeah,
time for them.
sure, no problem.
Okay. So I was gonna ask, because you've been to conventions before, you know, you were on Supernatural, The Mentalist, all of that. I wanted to ask, to bring it back to MegaCon Orlando, how is the Star Wars fandom different than the other fandoms that you've experienced there?
Well, I love all my fandoms equally. I have to say that.
Sure. Of
but,
course.
but Star Wars is so special just because it spans so many generations, and it is remarkable to me that, you know, I was born during the while the first trilogy was coming out, and there's never a time in my life when Star Wars did not exist. And I remember like playing Ewok Adventures in my yard,
I love
and
that.
um and it's just, it blows my mind that these stories are still being created. And like I remember a time during the first season when George Lucas came to set on, I think it was on John's birthday, and I was standing there like watching him tell stories and stuff,
So
and I was
cool.
just thinking, what must it be like to know that like way back in the 70s you had this idea to make this movie, and all of these people were poo-pooing your idea,
Mm,
and you had very limited technology,
yeah.
but you know you were going to make this space western, this space opera, and you did it. And then people were like, oh, that's pretty cool, okay. And now like through these decades, the technology has improved. Now we're at this point where we've got the volume, which is incredible, and it looks even better. But still, what endures, I think, is the heart of the movies. Like I don't think it would still be going if it weren't, you know, what we're connecting to is these characters and
Yeah.
the heart and the soul of it. And that's what I see in the fans is, I mean, I love that I get to see entire families who come to the conventions, and like the babies are in cosplay and the
Yeah.
grandparents are in cosplay, and there is so much love throughout the fandom and so much good being done. I mean, I had no idea that you know, I knew about Star Wars. I love Star Wars, but I was not like a fan on the level that I get to experience now. And to see these cosplay groups, the 501st, the Rebel Legion, the Mandalorian Mercs, who first of all are brilliantly skilled costume builders. They
Yeah.
make their own costumes, and then they go out and they do charity work. And it's just such a beautiful thing. And I love that they have built this community around their love for these stories, and they're just spreading all sorts of good in the world. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I love that. And that's what it's all about. As long as you're putting something good into the world, that's all we can do, really,
Yeah.
at the end of the day. And then my last question is a bit of a tangent, and it's a bit just for me, because
Okay.
I'm obsessed with The Last of Us. And I watched the season finale, you know, the other night. And I just wanted to know, are you in talks to play anyone in The Last of Us season 2 on HBO? Are you as obsessed as I am? Yeah.
I am obsessed with being in season 2 because people
Yes.
keep asking me that.
I'm
So
sure.
I
Yeah.
really hope that you know, I feel like it's a natural connection
Of course.
because I did, you know, I did the video game. And
Yeah.
although I would really, I wouldn't mind if I got to play a different character in season 2 and I got to stay alive a little bit longer,
That'd
because
be nice. Yeah.
I mean, Emily went out like a chump.
Yeah,
Oh, it was a pretty fun part that I got
same.
to do.
Yeah, but you're like, oh, I want to stay a bit longer, so might as well
Yeah.
write me
And
as someone
maybe
else.
get to do a scene with Pedro, since
Yeah,
now we're on the street because we did The Mentalist together and The Mandalorian together, and
full circle.
why not make it a trifecta?
Yeah, of course. Perfect. Well, I think that's all the time we really have. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. I'm a huge fan